So in this recording we're going to look at the concept of revenue. So we're interested in revenue because it's helpful for us to understand our total profit, and profit's quite important to any business, and can even be important when you're operating in the voluntary sector. So it's something which isn't just necessarily a concept that's significant in the commercial side of event management. So our total profit equals the total revenue minus the total cost of production. And basically our total revenue is the firm's total earnings for a particular period of time from the sale of a particular amount of product or output. So our total revenue is the price times the quantity. So if you sell 100 tickets at £5, your total revenue is going to be £500. And obviously, if you're trying to work out your profit, you're going to take that total revenue, £500, minus any costs of production. So if the costs of hosting your event are £300, then your total profit is going to be £200. So you've got the 500 minus 300 gives you 200. So it's quite critical that we understand what our total revenue is, and also where we are best placed in terms of what quantity and price we want to sell our tickets for in order to generate the best revenue. So the average revenue, this is the amount the firm earns per unit sold. So you're going to have your total revenue divided by the quantity sold, and then marginal revenue, not surprisingly because we've looked at a lot of things that we've talked about marginals, is the extra revenue gained by selling one more unit of output per period of time. So that's the change in the total revenue divided by the change in quantity. So if we look at this example from in the Begg and Ward book, so if you want to read more about this, go and have a look at that chapter there. So we've got our first column, we've got the price. So at the highest price here of 12, we sell one ticket, let's say, whereas at the bottom of that scale, at the price of £1, we are selling 12 tickets. So there's this price quantity relationship, so we will usually sell more at the lower price. And what we can see here, if we look at the total revenue, is that initially our total revenue will go up, comes to a point around about selling 6 or 7 tickets, it actually begins to drop down again, because although we're selling more of the tickets, there's a greater quantity there, the price has dropped so much that the revenue is going down. And we can also look at this in terms of the average revenue. So we sell one ticket at a price of £12, so £12 divided by 1 gives us that average revenue. But as we go down that table, you can see that the revenue starts to drop, or the average revenue rather starts to drop. So that goes down in all the way down to 1 there. Now if we look at marginal revenue, so remember this is the change in total revenue divided by the change in quantity. So here, where we've got this figure 10, this comes from the change in total revenue, which has gone up from 12 to 22, and it's changed by one unit of quantity. So you're going to divide that change up, which is 10, it's gone up by 10, that total revenue, divided by 1, and that gives us 10. And then going down another one, you can see here the total revenue goes from 22 to 30, so the change is 10. And again, it's gone up by 1 unit. So, it's 8. So it goes up by 8 and it changes by 1. So 8 divided by 1 is 8. Okay, and you can see that pattern all the way through there. And what you see is your marginal revenue gradually goes down and ultimately becomes negative. So if we look at our marginal revenue line, if we plotted that, you can see that it slopes down and at some point it goes through 0. So the idea behind this is that as you produce more of some product, and this could be in terms of selling, say, tickets for an event, you would typically have to reduce the price to sell. Now of course that isn't always the case, but eventually it would be the case for most things. And total revenue is greatest when the marginal revenue is 0, so where it crosses that 0 point. So if we look at our total revenue curve here, which doesn't quite align, or it does line, so there's the 0, it aligns there. So the top of that total revenue curve is where the marginal revenue crosses 0. Okay, and that's when we've got our greatest total revenue. So we can begin to look at some of the relationships between these different things that we're beginning to be able to plot. So if we look at the demand curve at the top there, so the demand curve, it always slopes downwards. So as the price drops, the demand tends to increase. And if we actually look at the total revenue curve, we can see that will go up to a certain point and then begin to drop. So the point here is that although we're actually selling more of an item, so in this case it could be tickets for an event, we're selling more of these, but because we're selling them at a much lower price, we begin to not get so much revenue. Okay, and then we can actually look at it in terms of the average revenue line, and the average revenue line you can see is the same as the demand curve, so that is going, sloping downwards. And then you've got your marginal revenue line, and you can see here the marginal revenue line, where that crosses zero, that's where your total revenue is at the highest. So these are all things that we will need to look at, when we're thinking about pricing. So it's quite important for you to understand some of these things. So if you're finding it tricky, I would recommend getting one of the textbooks out that I've recommended for this topic area and have a read of the chapter that I've recommended.